Revenge should last forever. And for that I really needed some patience. Everything is coming together nicely. I overlooked the signs. Not because I was blind but because I decided to trust. My mother's influence has always been significant. That's a bit intense. Doris was the choice she made for me. Not really. Not really. However, she had crafted the story. I made sure to see Doris as something that was bound to happen. A wonderful partner. A respectable woman. A person who would create a life together with me. She was absolutely right. Doris was everything you could imagine. Until she changed. Until she felt that being my wife just wasn't enough anymore. I leaned forward, gently tapping my fingers against the desk. Hey there, Peter. Out of all the men in the world, why him? I had thought about the idea of infidelity before. Being a lawyer comes with its own set of challenges. It's sad to see so many marriages come to an end. There have been quite a few betrayals. There are quite a few quiet happenings taking place behind closed doors. I used to think that if it ever happened to me, I would totally be aware of it. I would definitely feel it. But I didn't. Since it wasn't just one betrayal. It was quite a change. A gentle and thoughtful replacement. Planned takeover. The errors they committed. They made a little mistake in their calculations. They believed my silence was a sign of acceptance. They thought I was too old to stand up for myself. I'm really committed and can't just step back. But the reality? I had already left. Not in a physical way. Not just yet. However, on an emotional level. In a thoughtful way. I had stepped back. When a man stops caring and loses faith that anything can be saved, he can become quite unpredictable. That was their initial misstep. What was their second mistake? They thought I had nothing left to lose. They believed they had taken everything from me. But they overlooked it. I used to be a lawyer. Power isn't really about emotions. It's all about leverage. And I had some good leverage. Beyond what they could ever dream of. The plan is taking shape. I took my phone out of my pocket and started scrolling through my contacts. First, I reach out to my financial advisor. Hey there, James. I spoke with a steady voice. Hi there. I'd like to request that all funds in our joint accounts be frozen, starting right away. Thank you. He took a moment to think. Are you really sure about that, sir? Your wife's access is included in that. I'm fully aware of what it includes. Got it. The first move has been made. Next, I give my lawyer a call. Hey there, Stan. I said, my voice now even smoother. I'm looking to file for an expedited divorce. Absolutely firm. Hey there, David. Hey there, Stan. Let's take a moment to pause. Then a little sigh. I'll have the paperwork all set for you by morning. I've made the second move. So I decided to reach out to an old friend. A friend who had some favors to return. A person who focuses on causing trouble for others. And with that, the wheels started to turn. I leaned back, gazing at the ceiling, contemplating my next steps. They believed they had triumphed. They believed I had just stepped back, taking some time to heal. But I wasn't running at all. I was getting ready. By the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The following morning, the storm arrived. Not with a bang. Not with lightning, my friend. However, with quietness. Doris began her day by making her usual online transfer. Here's a payment for the house. How about treating yourself to one of those fancy boutique items she said weren't really needed? But this time, instead of the transaction going through, the screen flashed red. Oh no, it looks like the transaction didn't go through. She made a little face, refreshing the page. Still the same message. She gave it another go. This time, she's on her phone, hopping between accounts. I'm sorry, but that's a no for now. Doris was quite clever. She sensed that something wasn't quite right. That's when she picked up her coat, hopped into her Mercedes, the one I got her for her birthday, and headed to the bank, where reality finally hit her. The accounts that are frozen. Mrs. Landon, the bank manager said, adjusting her position behind his desk with a hint of unease. Absolutely. Doris replied, a bit annoyed. What seems to be the problem? It looks like there's a security hold on my account. Could you please take that out for me? The manager took a moment to think. I'm sorry, but that might not work out. Doris squinted her eyes. Why not, right? He took a breath, clearly hoping he didn't have to be the one sharing the news. Your husband has put a freeze on all joint accounts. His lawyer shared the needed documents. I'm sorry, but we can't give you access without his authorization. Doris took a quick breath. That's quite surprising. I can access these accounts. I have for many years. Absolutely, ma'am. The manager said with a friendly nod. And now you don't have it anymore. A creeping sense of dread filled her eyes. The truth gently settled in, sinking deep. I decided to distance myself from her. Absolutely. She never imagined I would actually go through with it. Not after all this time. Not after all that we've created together. She believed I would fall apart. But instead I decided to hold off on feeding them first. It looks like the credit cards were declined. When Doris left the bank, she found herself calling Peter, her hands trembling a bit. I can picture the conversation going something like this. Peter, he made everything freeze. What are we up to? However, Peter was dealing with his own challenges. While she was feeling anxious about the bank, I had already transitioned to phase 2. Her credit cards. As she was making her way into the bank branch, I was busy closing down all the lines of credit she could use. When she attempted to use her platinum card at a cafe on her way home, it was declined. She gave it another go. I'm sorry, but that's a no for now. She gave the emergency one from her purse a try. Sorry, but it's a no for now. And that was when the worry really began to creep in. Peter's business is struggling. As Doris faced her challenges, Peter was entering a situation that felt like a personal nightmare. Well, Peter really grew his business thanks to my help. Not because he was especially clever. Not because he was exceptionally skilled with money. Absolutely not. I had helped him out by pulling some strings. I was able to bring him clients. I provided him with access to the right people, the right investors, and the right markets. And now I was taking the rug out from under him. One by one, his major investors began to step away. First, the construction firm that had been working with him for years unexpectedly canceled all future contracts. Then the largest supplier for his company sent a courteous yet assertive email. We're sorry to share that, due to unexpected circumstances, we will be ending our partnership right away. Peter was unaware, but his business was facing a tough time ahead. By lunchtime, 2 more investors had decided to step back. By dinner, the company's cash flow was really tight. And when he took a look at his own accounts, they were in the red. I hadn't simply removed him from my life. I had ended his chance to survive. The house of cards falls down. As Doris and Peter were each going through tough times, my sons, Michael and Eric, were on the brink of their own surprising experience. Honestly, they never truly valued the life I offered. Everything they enjoyed, from their Ivy League tuition to the fancy cars in their driveways, was thanks to me. And yet they had turned against me. They referred to Peter as their father. They had already moved on in their thoughts before I even stepped out of that house. I provided them with exactly what they were looking for. I chose to let them go on without me. What's the first thing to go? Their tuition payments. Michael, who was in the middle of his master's degree, unexpectedly received a notice. Just a friendly reminder that your tuition bill is past due. Just a friendly reminder that if payment isn't received within 7 days, we will need to suspend your enrollment. Eric, who had become accustomed to his carefree lifestyle, discovered that his monthly allowance was all gone. No warning at all. No explanation needed. It's just gone. They reached out to their bank. And just like their mother, they received the same chilly response. Your father has taken away access to these funds. It looks like you don't have authorization anymore. Oh no, things are getting a bit chaotic. As the evening rolled in, the phone calls started coming in. Doris gave us a call. My sons gave me a call. Peter gave me a call. Even my mother, the woman who raised me and played a part in this betrayal, called. I didn't respond to any of them. Not just yet. Only after they had completely understood it. Only after they had experienced the loss. It wasn't until they truly realized, without a doubt, that the person they had overlooked, the one they had let go, was the very reason they had anything at all to begin with. As night fell, I picture them all gathered in that same cozy living room. The very room where they had come to their decision. This time the air felt different. This time they found themselves not in control. They were struggling in the water. What about me? I was watching them go down. Peter sat in his office, enjoying his usual overpriced coffee, completely unaware that his world was falling apart. 4 years, Peter had nurtured his business through relationships. It's not tough work. Not really about intelligence. Links. What about those connections? They belong to me. Since he began his so-called company, he has relied on my influence, my wonderful clients, my wonderful investors, my reputation, and I had lent him a hand. Created him. That time he was my closest friend, my brother in every way that matters. So what's the situation now? Well, I was thinking about unmaking him. The initial hit. The disappearing investors. An email was the first sign that something was amiss. What's the subject? Ending the contract. Peter quickly glanced at the message, a little frown appearing on his forehead. We hope this message finds you well. Unfortunately, we need to let you know that, due to some unexpected financial circumstances, we must terminate our ongoing contract with your firm, effective immediately. We appreciate your understanding in this matter. His jaw relaxed a bit. Who sent it? One of his closest investors. The one who maintained a steady cash flow. He placed the phone down and ran a hand through his hair, trying to brush away the unease that was settling in. This was no big deal. Seems there was a little mix-up. A quick phone call could sort that out. He called right away, putting on a cheerful smile when his contact picked up. Hi there, Chris. I just saw the email. Hey there. What's happening? Let's take a moment to pause. Lengthy one. Then Chris let out a little sigh. Hey there, Peter. I'm really sorry, my friend. Truly am. We just can't continue our involvement with you. Peter's fingers gently wrapped around the phone. What's the reason? What's new since last week? A moment of quiet. Then the words that made his stomach sink. Hey there, David. Everything turned chilly. What's up with him? Peter was let go. Chris paused for a moment, then spoke softly. Hey, Peter. I'm not sure what went on between you two, but it seems he's really expressing that partnering with you might not be the best idea. Peter jumped up from his chair, spilling his coffee all over his desk. This is just so frustrating, he said with a sigh. David wouldn't do something like that. He isn't. Chris interrupted him. Peter is quite a powerful man. A highly regarded individual. Just between us. If I had to choose between continuing our business together or working with him. Here we go with another pause. I would choose him every single time. The line just went silent. The dominoes tumbled down. Peter stood still, the phone still held to his ear long after the call had finished. Absolutely not. This couldn't be done. David had a lot of different qualities. Carefully planned, thoughtful, and assertive in court. But he wasn't the type of person to ruin someone's life. Was he really? His phone rang once more. Here's another investor. What's the message? Just the same. Then one more. And one more. By noon, 4 major clients had decided to withdraw. By 3 p.m., his suppliers were not picking up his calls. By 5 p.m., his whole business was struggling to stay afloat. And then came the last decisive moment. The licenses have been revoked. Peter was still in shock when his secretary walked in, her face looking quite pale. Excuse me, she said with a hint of uncertainty. Are we? Hey there. We just received a notice from the licensing board. He glanced up, feeling a flutter in his stomach. She took a deep breath, placing the document on his desk. Gently, he picked it up and read the first line. We want to inform you that, effective immediately, the following business licenses have been revoked because of some legal concerns related to conflicts of interest and ethical violations. The remaining words became a blur. His business was struggling. Absolutely. In a lawful manner. Absolutely. Peter's moment of understanding. He settled back in his chair, taking shallow breaths. This wasn't merely a stroke of bad luck. This was a carefully executed strike. Focus strike. And there was just one person who could pull off something like this. Hey there, David. His longtime buddy. His sibling. The man he had gently poked in the back. And now, Peter was discovering that David had a way of settling scores that was quite unexpected. He made sure you stayed down for good. The urgent call. When Peter finally collected his thoughts, he noticed he had 69 missed calls. Half of them came from Doris. What about the other half? Hey there, investors. Team members. Hey there, clients. Everyone is feeling a bit anxious. Everyone was just trying to understand what was going on. And through it all, David didn't respond at all. Peter took a deep breath and dialed again. Went straight to voicemail. The same cheerful voicemail message that greeted him each time he attempted to call that day. Hi there. You've reached David Landon. I'm not available right now. Feel free to leave a message. Beep. Smiling face with smiling as Peter let out a quick breath, holding onto the phone tightly. Hey there, David. He began, his voice a bit tight. Hey there. I'm not quite sure what you're up to, but it might be a good idea to take a break. Quiet. He took a deep breath. Hey, I think we should have a chat. Whenever you get a chance, just give me a call back, alright? This has gone on long enough. The call has ended. Your message wasn't acknowledged. Peter looked at his phone, feeling his heart race. For the very first time he felt a bit scared. Because David was more than just mad. He was doing more than just getting back at someone. He was making Peter disappear. And there was really nothing he could do to stop it. The house was so peaceful that evening. It's a bit too quiet. Doris was cozy in the living room, holding her phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The lamp beside her gave off a soft, flickering light, gently highlighting the concern on her face. She gave David a call. Once more. Here we go again. I'm sorry, but I don't have an answer for you right now. No responses at all. Her hands shook a little as she attempted to call Peter next. But even before the first ring, she had a feeling about what was coming. The identical voicemail. It looks like the number you're trying to reach isn't available right now. Doris let out a shaky breath, glancing around the room. Michael sat comfortably on the couch, gazing at his laptop. However, he wasn't typing. His screen was stuck on something. A message from his university. Eric, however, was pacing back and forth. He always found it hard to stay put when things weren't going his way. So, what's happening at the moment? Things just weren't going their way. Doris was aware of it. Her boys were aware of it. Yet, everyone seemed hesitant to voice it. That would mean acknowledging it. It's amazing to acknowledge that David had achieved what seemed impossible. That he had completely torn their whole foundation apart. The tuition funds are gone. Michael had been quiet for more than an hour. It's been a while since he opened his student portal to see when his next tuition payment is due. It had been a while since he noticed the bright red notice at the top of the screen. Hey there, just a quick note. Your tuition payment is past due. Please make your payment promptly to keep your enrollment active. His stomach felt like it had dropped. That doesn't seem quite right. His tuition was always covered ahead of time. He didn't even give it a second thought. But when he looked at his financial records, his heart began to race. The money had disappeared. His father had taken care of everything. Michael had always thought, always felt, that his education was something he could count on. That it would always be around. Just like his dad always was. Now he felt a bit uncertain about both. He reminisced about what they had shared with him just last night. Uncle Peter feels more like a father to us now. His stomach felt all knotted up. He had made a mistake. Eric's lifestyle is falling apart. Eric was the first to speak up. Hey, Mum. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just attempted to buy gas, but my card didn't go through. Once more. Doris didn't seem to react much at all. She was just focused on her phone, her thoughts drifting away. He chuckled to himself, walking back and forth. I gave the bank a call, and you won't believe what happened. It looks like my account has been emptied. He turned around, glancing at his mom and brother. Is anyone going to mention it? Dad is deciding to stop supporting us. Michael tightened his jaw, yet he remained silent. Doris, on the other hand, finally released a gentle sigh. Absolutely, she acknowledged. It sure is. Eric chuckled lightly, throwing his hands up in the air. Oh, that's wonderful. Honestly, what did you expect would happen? You let Uncle Peter take advantage of him. Well, it looks like we're in a bit of a tough spot now. Doris turned her head to look at him. I didn't allow Peter to do anything. She let out a hiss. Your dad. She paused for a moment, letting out a sharp breath. Your dad is just responding to the situation. That's everything. Eric chuckled once more. Getting back at someone. Hey Mom, it's time to wake up. Dad is setting everything on fire. And for the first time that day, Doris felt a spark of belief. The phone call that turned everything around. As soon as the house phone rang, the whole room fell silent. Doris grabbed it up so quickly that she almost let it slip from her hands. David, she said softly. However, the voice on the other end wasn't David's. It was her mom. And her tone was a bit pointed. Chilly. Doris, Margaret mentioned. Hey there. Are you sitting down? Doris furrowed her brow, holding the phone a bit more firmly. Is everything okay? Margaret let out a breath, as if getting ready for something significant. Then she said the words that made Doris's vision go a little fuzzy. Your father's retirement fund has disappeared. Doris felt her mouth go dry. She softly whispered. Margaret continued, her voice calm and reassuring. I took a look this morning. The accounts, my friend. The ones that David took care of for us. They're all empty. Every single penny. We're a bit short on funds, Doris. Doris was having a hard time catching her breath. Oh, but that just can't be done. David just wouldn't do that. Oh, wouldn't he just? Margaret's voice became more pointed. I believe he would. It seems like he just did. Doris felt a whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. Her dad. Her mom. They had counted on David for years. His investments. His management style. His knack for getting things to function smoothly. So what's next? Now it was all gone, huh? She tightly closed her eyes. Her parents were covering the consequences of her mistake. And for the first time since this all began, she felt something she never imagined she would. I'm feeling a bit down about things. The moment of understanding arrives. Doris could hardly recall the moment she hung up the phone. Everything felt a bit hazy. She could still hear her mother's voice echoing in her ears. We're a bit short on funds. Her son's accusations still stung in her heart. What were you expecting to happen? And above all else, the silence from David was truly striking. She had thought, perhaps a bit too optimistically, that he would be upset, that he would raise his voice. Let's discuss, make some claims. But he didn't. Instead, he had just stepped away. And in doing so, he had unfortunately destroyed everything. He allowed them to make their choice. And then he had shown them what that choice meant for them. And now, as she sat there, holding her phone tightly, Doris finally understood the harsh reality. It looks like David won't be returning. He decided not to save them. He decided not to fix it. And for the very first time in her life, she came to a wonderful realization. She had never really gotten to know him. She had known the version of David who was always there for them. The version of David who cherished her wholeheartedly. The version of David who always took the high road. But the actual David, the true David, was the one observing them fall apart. And he wasn't doing anything to stop it. The house of cards falls down entirely. That night, as Doris lay awake in bed, gazing at the ceiling, she reflected on how swiftly everything had unraveled. Just one night. That was all it needed. Yesterday she believed she had it all. Today she found herself with nothing. And the toughest part was that she could only point the finger at herself. Doris had never experienced fear quite like this. Not during her time as a college student trying to get through finals with limited funds. Not when she was a young mother, juggling the challenges of twins crying through the night. Not even when she came to understand that her feelings for her husband had changed from what they used to be. No, this fear felt unique. This time it was more than just about her. This time she had lost it all. And to make matters more challenging, she wasn't sure how to resolve it. The house was a bit of a mess. Her sons were feeling quite anxious. Her mom was calling over and over. Peter had become quiet. And the only person who could fix it, the man she had betrayed, wasn't picking up her calls. Calls are starting. She gave it another go. The phone rang. And it rang. And it rang. Right to voicemail. Hi there. You've reached David Landon. I'm not available right now. Feel free to leave a message. Doris clenched her jaw, fighting the burning in her throat. He was ignoring her. She tried texting. No response. He emailed. Nothing. Then desperation took over. She picked up the house phone. Because surely, he wouldn't ignore a call from his home. But he did. And that's when she knew. This wasn't a game. David wasn't coming back. The sons begged. Michael and Eric had never worried about money before. It was always there. Till now. Until their father, the man they had dismissed, replaced, mocked, had taken it all away. And they weren't handling it well. I don't understand. Michael muttered, pacing. He can't just cut us off like this, can he? Eric scoffed. Yeah, genius. He just did. Michael ran a hand through his hair. Okay, but Mom. He won't let us go homeless, right? He won't just abandon us. Doris swallowed hard. She wanted to say no. She wanted to tell them David would come back. But the words wouldn't come. Because she wasn't sure anymore. Eric grabbed his phone. Screw this. I'm calling him myself. He dialed. Voicemail. Michael tried next. Voicemail. Then they tried begging. Dad, come on. We were just upset. We didn't mean it. You're still our father, okay? Just call us back. Dad, please. We're sorry. Dad, we need you. But David never answered. And the silence hurt more than anything he could have said. Doris's last attempt. Doris knew what she had to do. She had to see him. Force him to listen. Force him to forgive her. So she got in her car, the one David had bought her, and drove straight to his office. But when she arrived, the receptionist wouldn't let her through. I'm sorry, Mrs. Landon. The woman said, her voice carefully neutral. Mr. Landon has given explicit instructions not to see you. Doris's stomach dropped. Not to see her. Her own husband. She forced a smile. Maybe you misunderstood. We're married. He'll see me. The receptionist hesitated. Then, with quiet sympathy, she handed Doris an envelope. Doris took it with trembling fingers, her heart hammering. She stepped aside, ripped it open, and pulled out a single document. A divorce petition. Filed. Ready. A note was attached. 5 simple words. There's nothing left to fix. Doris couldn't breathe. She had lost. And David had already moved on. The mother's warning. That night when Doris got home, her mother was waiting. Margaret sat in the living room, hands clasped, watching as Doris stumbled through the door, shell-shocked. She already knew. Doris could see it in her eyes. The disappointment. The resignation. The judgment. I told you to be careful, Margaret said, her voice calm but sharp. Doris let out a bitter laugh. Careful. Careful about what, Mother? Margaret exhaled, shaking her head. About underestimating a man like David. Doris clenched her fists. He told me. I told you that men adjust, Margaret interrupted smoothly. I told you that your father adjusted. That doesn't mean David would. She gave Doris a long, cold look. I told you what you needed to do to keep him. And instead you let your pride ruin everything. Doris gritted her teeth. I just wanted my freedom. Margaret nodded. And now you have it. Tell me, how does it feel? Doris said nothing. Because the answer felt like hell. Peter breaks. By midnight Peter finally cracked. His business was gone. His finances were in ruins. His best friend had destroyed him. And for the first time he realized why. 'Cause he deserved it. Because David had trusted him. Because David had built him. And he had betrayed him. But he wasn't going to accept this. So he did the one thing he had left. He drove to David's house, stormed up the front steps, and pounded on the door. "David," he shouted. "Come out and face me." Silence. Then slowly the front door opened. And there David stood. Unbothered. Cold. Peter's rage faltered. Because the man standing in front of him wasn't angry. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't out for revenge. He had already won. And Peter was already finished. David tilted his head slightly. "What exactly do you want, Peter?" he asked, voice calm. Peter swallowed. "You ruined me." David nodded. Peter's hands clenched. "You had no right." David stepped forward, eyes dangerous. "I had every right," he murmured. And Peter, for the first time in his life, felt fear. Because David wasn't just getting even. He was making sure Peter never got up again. The final begging. Doors called one last time that night. One last attempt. One last plea. "David, please. We were wrong. I was wrong. Just talk to me. Just give me one more chance." But there was no response. And this time, there never would be. Because David was already gone. And he wasn't looking back. I watched the phone vibrate on the table. "Doris." Again. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't hear it. Not because I was busy. But because she no longer deserved an answer. I let it ring. And ring. Until it stopped. Then, a minute later, another call. This time from Michael. Then Eric. Then Doris's mother. All of them. One after another. I let them all go to voicemail. Because for the first time in 19 years, I didn't know them anything. Not my time. Not my patience. Not my presence. And certainly not my forgiveness. The confrontation they didn't see coming. I knew it wouldn't end there. I knew Doris well enough to expect the next move. So when she showed up at my office the next morning, I wasn't surprised. She stormed past the receptionist before anyone could stop her, slamming the door behind her. I leaned back in my chair watching her. Her eyes were red. Her hands shaking. She was desperate now. But she deserved to be. "David," he started. Her voice raw. "Please." I didn't say anything. I just watched her, letting the silence do the work. She took a breath, swallowing hard. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you." I tilted my head slightly. "Which part, Doris? The lying? The betrayal? The planning? The fact that you had no intention of stopping until I caught you?" She flinched. That was the truth, wasn't it? She wasn't sorry she had done it. She was sorry I found out. She took another step forward. "David, please," she whispered. "Love you." I let out a slow, quiet breath. Then I stood, walked around the desk, stopped right in front of her. And then I said the words that would finally end this. "No, you don't, Doris." Her breath caught. Her lips trembled. I didn't stop. You never did. Not in the way that mattered. Her eyes shone with tears. "That's not true." Cut her off. "You loved what I did for you. You loved what I provided. You loved the security, the lifestyle, the illusion. But me, the man, the husband, you haven't loved me for years, Doris. Maybe you never did." She shook her head rapidly, stepping closer. "That's not true. I made a mistake." Smiled. That small, cold, knowing smile. The one that finally made her stop. "You didn't make a mistake, Doris," I said softly. "You made a choice. And now she had to live with it. The sons who chose the wrong side." By the time I got home that evening, my sons were waiting. Michael and Eric stood in the living room, arms crossed, their faces grim. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it. Silence. Then finally Michael spoke. "Dad, come on," he said, his voice tight. "Isn't this a little extreme?" I didn't respond. He sighed. "I mean, okay, we get it. Mom screwed up. But don't you think ruining us is a little much?" I raised an eyebrow. "Ruining you?" I repeated, voice flat. Eric scoffed, shaking his head. Dad, we have nothing left. No money. No security. No future. I let that sit between us for a moment. Then I pushed off the door, walked right up to them, and said the words that finally made them understand. Welcome to the life you thought I didn't matter in. Michael's mouth snapped shut. Eric swallowed. I tilted my head. You thought I was just there, just existing, that my presence was optional, that I was just a provider, bank account, and when you thought you had a replacement, I let out a quiet chuckle. You dismissed me like I was nothing. They didn't speak, 'cause they knew I was right. And now they wanted me to fix it. Now they wanted my money, my security, my presence, but they had already chosen. And so had I. Peter's last attempt. I should have expected it. That final, desperate move. That night, as I packed the last of my things, Peter showed up, banged on my door, opened it, unsurprised. He stood there, looking like a man who had lost everything. 'Cause he had. David, he started, his voice rough. We need to talk. I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. I just looked at him. He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. I screwed up, he muttered. I know that. But you destroyed me, man. You ruined my business, my reputation, my entire damn life. I let him talk. Let him spill his excuses, his regrets, his pathetic attempts to shift the blame. Then finally I spoke. Peter blinked. What? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything. To be betrayed by someone you trusted. To have the people you cared about turn their backs on you. He swallowed hard. David, I didn't mean. Cut him off. You did. And that's why I don't care. His face paled. For the first time he understood. There was nothing to fix. There was no forgiveness. No second chance. I let the silence stretch between us. Then finally I shut the door. And locked it. Because Peter was already dead to me. The goodbye that wasn't really a goodbye. The next morning I packed my bags. I had everything I needed. My wealth. My power. My freedom. I walked through the house one last time, letting my fingers trail over the furniture, the walls, the pieces of a life that was never truly mine. Then without looking back I walked out the door, leaving them behind. For good. And the best part. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel regret. Felt free. Finally. Completely. Free. I stepped into the hotel lobby, feeling lighter than I had in years. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. Welcome, Mr. Landon. Your suite is ready. Thank you, I said, handing over my card, the one doors couldn't touch. As she processed my check-in, I glanced at my phone. 67 missed calls. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. They were still begging. Still scrambling to reach me. Still trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. But it was too late. Because for the first time in 19 years, I wasn't theirs to manipulate anymore. I was done. And they were exactly where they deserved to be. The fallout begins. By the next morning, the desperation had reached its peak. I ignored their calls all night. But the messages kept coming. Doris, David, please, I'm begging you. Just talk to me. Michael, come on. Let's just meet and figure this out. Eric, we screwed up. We know that. But we're still your family. Margaret, Doris's mother. David, enough of this. You've made your point. That one almost made me laugh. Made my point. Well, I wasn't done making my point. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, as I watched everything unravel from a distance. Doris faces reality. Doris must have finally realized how deep she was in when she went to the bank. Again. Except this time, she wasn't just trying to access her frozen accounts. She was trying to save herself. She wanted a loan. A desperate, last-minute attempt to keep up the illusion that everything wasn't falling apart. But she should have known better. Because when the loan officer looked at her records, all he saw was a woman with no financial stability. No job. No steady income. Nothing of her own. She had been comfortable for too long, relying on my money, my name, my influence. Now she had none of it. So when the bank denied her loan request, she walked out with a stunned, broken expression. Because for the first time in her life, she truly had nothing. Michael and Eric learned the hard way. Michael tried to keep up his usual confidence. He called his college, demanding they give him an extension on his tuition. He argued. He negotiated. He tried to leverage my name. But my name, it didn't belong to him anymore. The financial aid office wasn't interested in his excuses. They gave him a 7-day deadline. If he didn't come up with the payment, he was out. Eric, meanwhile, had his own wake-up call when he went to get his car serviced. Only to find out the payments hadn't gone through. That's when it finally hit him. He didn't own his car. I did. And now, the repo company was on its way to take it back. I imagine the look on his face when he realized he wasn't as independent as he thought. He had spent years thinking I was just a wallet. He knew what it was like to live without it. Peter's final collapse. Peter was drowning. He had spent years riding on my connections, my influence, my generosity. He had stolen my wife, my family, my place. And now he had nothing. The moment I cut him off, his investors scattered. His business was already a corpse. But the real kicker, the lawsuits started rolling in. All those clients he had screwed over. The ones he had overcharged. The ones he had misled. The ones who trusted him because I vouched for him. They were coming for him now. And without my protection, he was finished. I imagined him sitting at his desk, staring at the pile of legal notices, realizing that the man he thought he had replaced had completely destroyed him. But let him rot. The moment they broke. By the third day the calls slowed. The messages turned from anger to pleading. They weren't demanding anymore. They weren't telling me to be reasonable. They were begging. And that's when I knew. I had won. I had broken them. I sat in my hotel suite, scrolling through the messages, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. 'Cause I was free. For the first time since I married Doris. For the first time since I had been manipulated into being the perfect husband and the perfect provider. I wasn't someone's safety net. I wasn't someone's backup plan. I wasn't someone's wallet. I was just me. And I liked that. Final call. It was a Friday evening when the last call came. I didn't expect to answer it. But something made me pick up. Not out of sympathy. Not out of regret. Just curiosity. I pressed the phone to my ear. Silence. Then Doris's voice. Broken. David. I didn't say anything. She exhaled shakily. I don't even know what to say. I took a sip of my drink. Then don't say anything. I need to understand. How did we end up here? I almost laughed. As if she didn't already know. But I answered anyway. We ended up here the moment you thought I was replaceable. She let out a quiet sob. Can't we fix this? She whispered. I shook my head. Even though she couldn't see me. No, Doris. I said calmly. Peter showed up. Banged on my door. Opened it. Unsurprised. He stood there. Looking like a man who had lost everything. 'Cause he had. David. He started. His voice rough. We need to talk. I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. I just looked at him. He exhaled sharply. Rubbing a hand over his face. I screwed up, he muttered. I know that. But you destroyed me, man. You ruined my business. My reputation. My entire damn life. I let him talk. Let him spill his excuses. His regrets. His pathetic attempts to shift the blame. Then finally I spoke. Peter blinked. What? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything. To be betrayed by someone you trusted. To have the people you cared about turn their backs on you. He swallowed hard. David, I didn't mean. Cut him off. You did. And that's why I don't care. His face paled. For the first time he understood. There was nothing to fix. There was no forgiveness. No second chance. I let the silence stretch between us. Then finally I shut the door. And locked it. Because Peter was already dead to me. The goodbye that wasn't really a goodbye. The next morning I packed my bags. I had everything I needed. My wealth, my power, my freedom. I walked through the house one last time, letting my fingers trail over the furniture, the walls, the pieces of a life that was never truly mine. Then, without looking back, I walked out the door, leaving them behind, for good. And the best part, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel regret. Felt free. Finally. Completely. Free. I stepped into the hotel lobby, feeling lighter than I had in years. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Welcome, Mr. Landon. Your suite is ready." "Thank you," I said, handing over my card, the one doors couldn't touch. As she processed my check-in, I glanced at my phone. 67 missed calls. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. They were still begging. Still scrambling to reach me. Still trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. But it was too late. Because for the first time in 19 years, I wasn't theirs to manipulate anymore. I was done. And they were exactly where they deserved to be. The fallout begins. By the next morning, the desperation had reached its peak. I ignored their calls all night. But the messages kept coming. "Doris, David, please, I'm begging you. Just talk to me. Michael, come on. Let's just meet and figure this out. Eric, we screwed up. We know that. But we're still your family. Margaret, Doris's mother. David, enough of this. You've made your point." That one almost made me laugh. Made my point. Well, I wasn't done making my point. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, as I watched everything unravel from a distance. Doris faces reality. Doris must have finally realized how deep she was in when she went to the bank. Again. Except this time, she wasn't just trying to access her frozen accounts. She was trying to save herself. She wanted a loan. A desperate, last-minute attempt to keep up the illusion that everything wasn't falling apart. But she should have known better. Because when the loan officer looked at her records, all he saw was a woman with no financial stability. No job. No steady income. Nothing of her own. She had been comfortable for too long, relying on my money, my name, my influence. Now she had none of it. So when the bank denied her loan request, she walked out with a stunned, broken expression. Because for the first time in her life, she truly had nothing. Michael and Eric learned the hard way. Michael tried to keep up his usual confidence. He called his college, demanding they give him an extension on his tuition. He argued. He negotiated. He tried to leverage my name. But my name, it didn't belong to him anymore. The financial aid office wasn't interested in his excuses. They gave him a 7-day deadline. If he didn't come up with the payment, he was out. Eric, meanwhile, had his own wake-up call when he went to get his car serviced. Only to find out the payments hadn't gone through. That's when it finally hit him. He didn't own his car. I did. And now, the repo company was on its way to take it back. I imagined the look on his face when he realized he wasn't as independent as he thought. He had spent years thinking I was just a wallet. He knew what it was like to live without it. Peter's final collapse. Peter was drowning. He had spent years riding on my connections, my influence, my generosity. He had stolen my wife, my family, my place. And now he had nothing. The moment I cut him off, his investors scattered. His business was already a corpse. But the real kicker, the lawsuits started rolling in. All those clients he had screwed over. The ones he had overcharged. The ones he had misled. The ones who trusted him because I vouched for him. They were coming for him now. And without my protection, he was finished. I imagined him sitting at his desk, staring at the pile of legal notices, realizing that the man he thought he had replaced had completely destroyed him. But let him rot. The moment they broke. By the third day the calls slowed. The messages turned from anger to pleading. They weren't demanding anymore. They weren't telling me to be reasonable. They were begging. And that's when I knew. I had won. I had broken them. I sat in my hotel suite, scrolling through the messages, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. 'Cause I was free. For the first time since I married Doris. For the first time since I had been manipulated into being the perfect husband and the perfect provider. I wasn't someone's safety net. I wasn't someone's backup plan. I wasn't someone's wallet. I was just me. And I liked that. Final call. It was a Friday evening when the last call came. I didn't expect to answer it. But something made me pick up. Not out of sympathy. Not out of regret. Just curiosity. I pressed the phone to my ear. Silence. Then Doris's voice. Broken. David. I didn't say anything. She exhaled shakily. I don't even know what to say. I took a sip of my drink. Then don't say anything. I need to understand. How did we end up here? I almost laughed. As if she didn't already know. But I answered anyway. We ended up here the moment you thought I was replaceable. She let out a quiet sob. Can't we fix this? She whispered. I shook my head. Even though she couldn't see me. No, Doris. I said calmly. We can't. Another silence. Then, her final plea. David, I still love you. Smiled. Slow. Knowing. Victorious smile. And then, finally, I gave her my answer. That's nice, said. But I don't love you. And with that, hung up. The last laugh. I leaned back in my chair, stretching. Outside my window, the city lights gleamed, endless, and full of possibilities. I was free. Numb. They were drowning. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Not anymore. Because I had made my choice. I had walked away. And for the first time in 19 years, I was truly, completely, unapologetically happy.